the spin of all things, on angular momentum, torque, and the soul's turning. The physicist tells us that in the world of matter, every object that rotates has spin, that when this rotation possesses inertia, it manifests as angular momentum. And when another force acts upon it, when it twists or is twisted, it feels torque. These three concepts, spin, angular momentum, and torque, are familiar to engineers, astronomers, and gymnasts alike. But beneath their physical definitions lies a deeper truth, a metaphysical rhythm, a grammar of the world's becoming. For it seems that everything, every person, every thought, every system, every conversation, every betrayal, and every return has a spin. And from that spin flows a kind of stability or instability, a tendency to keep going unless acted upon. That is angular momentum. And when the world acts, when pressure is applied or resistance is met, that twist, that wrenching, that attempt to change the spin, that is torque. These are not just the mechanics of motion. These are the shapes of meaning. They are the geometry of relationships, the structure of memory, the dance of identity, the metaphysical dynamics of a universe that is not still, but always turning. Let us take these three, spin, angular momentum, and torque, not as isolated terms, but as a triune grammar of being. Let us walk them slowly as if through a garden. Let us see what they can teach us about the nature of change, the endurance of motion, and the soul's strange resistance to having its orbit broken. 1. Spin, the signature of a thing. To say something spins is not merely to say that it rotates, it is to say that it moves around a center, that it holds to an axis, that it generates symmetry by repetition, that it possesses a rhythm not imposed from without, but arising from within. Spin is the mark of life. It is the pulse of the atom, the turning of the planet, the swirl of galaxies and storm systems. Even the electron spins, although we are told it is not spinning in the classical sense. It possesses intrinsic angular momentum, yes, but we may call it spin because it has the properties of rotation. Something about it twirls. But let us step beyond physics now. Ideas spin. They develop momentum, whirl into culture, generate gravity. You've seen this, a phrase that catches, a theory that spreads. It spins. A person spins too. Not necessarily out of control, though that can happen, but in the sense of possessing a certain rhythm of being. Some spin clockwise, focused, structured, ritualistic. Some spin wild, erratic, unstable. But even chaos has its axis. To know the spin of something is to recognize its internal patterning, its way of moving around itself, its preference for repetition, its echo. To understand a person's spin is to feel their frequency. Some spin with joy, others with suspicion. Some spin so fast they blur their own outline. Some spin so slow they're mistaken for stillness, until something brushes near and they shimmer. The spin is the soul's signature, and nothing that lives is without it. 2. Angular momentum, the persistence of a thing. Now, spin alone is one thing, but spin plus inertia, that's something else. That's angular momentum. It is the resistance to change in rotational motion. It is the tendency of a spinning object to keep spinning unless an external force acts upon it. In life, this is the weight of habit, the momentum of story, the staying power of personality, even when it no longer serves. This is why people stay in relationships long past their end, why systems remain in place even when corrupt, why the record plays long after the needle should have lifted. Angular momentum is not just physical, it is emotional, cultural, generational. It is why traumas echo across decades, why families repeat the same cycle, why nations replay the same war under different names. To possess angular momentum is to be in motion around a center, and to resist attempts to change that motion. There is a kind of stubbornness to it, a fidelity even. It says, "This is how I turn. This is how I've always turned. Who are you to shift me?" But momentum is not always healthy. It can preserve, but it can also trap. Think of someone who cannot forgive, not because the injury is still fresh, but because their identity has begun to orbit around the grievance. Their memory spins, not with freedom, but with inertia. They cannot stop. They are caught in a turning, Angular momentum preserves the past in motion, and the longer a thing spins, the harder it is to stop it, not because it is right, but because it has become its own force. 3. Torque, the act of intervention. Torque is what you feel when you try to turn something that doesn't want to turn. It is the application of force at an angle, not a shove, not a push, but a twist. It is what a mechanic applies to a bolt, what a dancer feels in the hip, what the universe does to you when it tells you, change. Torque is not always violent, but it is always disruptive. It is what breaks momentum, what challenges spin. It is the demand for a new axis. In life, torque often comes disguised. A death, a betrayal, a question you can't shake, a silence that lasts too long. Suddenly your spin no longer satisfies. Your momentum no longer holds. You are being turned, not stopped, but reoriented. This is painful, because angular momentum resists torque. The longer you've been spinning, the harder it is to change course. But torque is necessary. Without torque, there is no redirection. Without torque, there is only the drift of habit. Sometimes torque arrives from within. A dream, a vision, a sickness. Sometimes it arrives from another, a stranger, a teacher, a child. Someone speaks, not with volume but with leverage, and you begin to feel the twist. Torque is not cruelty, it is transformation in disguise. But you must be willing to yield. 4. The tension between force and freedom. Torque requires force, but too much force, and the object breaks. Too little, and nothing changes. This is a moral question. How much pressure do you apply to shift a person's course, to change a mind, to bend a culture? The tyrant applies too much. He snaps the bolt. He breaks the spine. The coward applies too little. He watches as injustice spins on. The wise man studies the torque. He finds the axis. He applies just enough pressure to awaken, but not to destroy. This is what teachers do at their best. This is what lovers do when they ask each other to grow. But let us not forget, torque also operates on the self. You will feel yourself turning against your own will sometimes. You will feel your own momentum resisting the call to evolve. You will be asked to rotate, to become, to bend, to yield. And you will have to decide, do I hold to my spin, or do I allow myself to be re-angled? This is not just a question of physics, it is the question of the soul. 5. The dance of all three. These three, spin, momentum, torque, do not operate in isolation. They are a system, a choreography. Spin is the identity, the rhythm. Momentum is the fidelity to that rhythm over time. Torque is the disturbance that makes new rhythm possible. You can feel all three in every real moment of growth. Think of a young man with a strong opinion. He spins. He repeats his certainties. Over time, they calcify. They develop momentum. He becomes the guy who always says. He begins to orbit his own image. Then someone speaks, or something shatters, and suddenly, torque. He resists. He braces. But the twist continues, and if he does not break, he bends. He begins to spin differently. A new axis emerges. He becomes someone else. This is not destruction. This is development, and it is how everything that lives grows.